Hi, I'm Parneet Jaggi, and this is going to be a series of lectures on Katherine Mansfield's famous short story, A Cup of Tea. So, before we move into the short story, the interesting fiction that we're going to take up, let's talk a little bit about this famous author, Katherine Mansfield, who was actually a writer best known for his modernist short stories and also for her association with Virginia Woolf and other members of the Bloomsbury group. Now, Katherine Mansfield is even till date one of New Zealand's most famous writer. And now, because she was closely associated with D.H. Lawrence and Virginia Woolf and such writers, so she was specifically known among the literary circle. And when we talk about her creativity, her creative years were burdened with loneliness, illness, alienation, and all of these traits are reflected in her work with a bitter depiction of marital and family relationships of her middle class characters. Her short stories, like Virginia Woolf, are also notable for their use of stream of consciousness, and also she's compared to the Russian writer Anton Chekhov. Her depiction of trivial events and subtle changes in human behavior are noteworthy. So, when we talk about her biography, she was born in Wellington, New Zealand, and into a middle class colonial family. Her father was a banker, and her mother, Annie Dyer, was of a genteel origin. She lived for 6 years in the rural village, and then later in life she said, I imagine I was always writing. So, at approximately at the age of 9, she started her first story and she published her first short story entitled Enna Blake. And this appeared in the school newspapers and also in this magazine called the High School Reporter in Wellington. As a first step to her rebellion against her background, she moved to London and studied at Queen's College. Now, when she became the editor of her college newspaper, Mansfield actually found her life's work and decided to become a writer. Now, we see when we look at her life in detail, she traveled a lot. When she joined Queen's College, she joined the staff of the college magazine. Then she returned to New Zealand in 1906. She also took up music, became an accomplished cellist, but her father denied her the opportunity to become a musician. And then she also had affairs in her youth. Then we see she also studied typing, bookkeeping, and then again, she moved to England. She devoted herself to writing and never to come back to New Zealand again. After an unhappy marriage to George Brown, whom she left just a few days after the wedding, Mansfield toured for a while as an extra in operas. So we see she was not a member herself of the Bloomsbury group of writers, but she was very close to this group of writers because of which she had quite a number of literary links and she was friends with D.H. Lawrence and Virginia Woolf. Now we see she had an unhappy marriage, but she also had happy as well as unhappy affairs. Like she had an affair with the famous musician Trowell, and then she stayed in Germany. She wrote satirical sketches of German characters, which also got her some fame. Then, when we look at her life, while after her return to London, she became ill. She had a number of diseases, and this illness actually contributed to her weak health for the rest of her life. And she was broken and shattered, and after that, she kept writing. Although she attended literary parties, but she was not active in the other social life. She was then diagnosed with pulmonary tuberculosis in 1917. Moving from one country to the next in search of a cure of her ailment, she settled for the last time at a spiritual commune in France. in Fontainebleau in France, and in January 1923, she died of a pulmonary hemorrhage after running up a flight of stairs. So, when we look at her overall reputation, her reputation as a writer of brilliantly compressed short fiction had been well established by the time of her death. Now, let's have a look at her works. Her final works, apart from unfinished materials and manuscripts published by Murray after her death, are The Dove's Nest and Something Childish. At the time of her death in January 1923, she had several unfinished works, including poems, which, along with the Journal of Katherine Mansfield and the Letters of Katherine Mansfield, were published posthumously after her death. So we see that her last years actually were spent in southern France and in Switzerland, and she kept seeking relief from her tuberculosis and other illnesses. And with the company of her literary friends and family and other people, she wrote much. She had a great output in literary writing about her own roots and her childhood. So these writings were later collected and published by different people. And we see that only 3 volumes of Mansfield's stories were published during her lifetime. Now, Mansfield actually was greatly influenced by the Russian writer Anton Chekhov, sharing his warm humanity and attention to small details of human behavior. Her influence on the development of the modern short story was also notable, because we see that among her literary friends, there were these famous stalwarts, literary stalwarts like Aldous Huxley, Virginia Woolf, and who actually considered her overpraised. And also we see D.H. Lawrence, who later turned against Murray and her. Mansfield's journal, letters, and scrapbook were edited by her husband, who ignored her wish that he should tear up and burn as much as possible of the papers she left behind her. So we see in Katherine Mansfield's life a rich literary output, but a broken and a sick, ailing female who died of diseases. So we'll take up the short story, A Cup of Tea, in the coming lectures. Thank you for now.